It's an absolute privilege to be here. TEDxUFS, yay! No student movement in democratic South Africa has received the amount of attention that the combined student movements of Fees Must Fall, Reform Phuket, Tax Uprising, Open Stellies, Rhodes Must Fall, Stain Must Fall, Swart Must Fall, Patriarchy Must Fall, the Trans Collective, the Black Student Stokvel, the Black Student Movement, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth in 2015 have received. And none have received such a gloomy response from scholars either. In March 2015 already, the sociology professor, Xolela Mangu from UCT, was warning that what we see is a looming racial civil war. And in December 2015, the editor-in-chief of the very prestigious South African Journal of Science, John Butler-Adam, said that what we are going to see is the end of quality higher education in South Africa because of underfunding. I'm not here today to talk about that. I'm here to talk today about some of the good news that come out of the student movement. In fact, I want us to think about various kinds of ways of understanding what happened in 2015 and what's still happening today. In other words, I want us to try and step back, and that's not easy. That's not easy because many of the events that we have seen in 2015 have been very, very traumatic for many students involved, for many people involved. And then there's another thing that I'm here to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about matches. How did it start? Well, one way of understanding the student movement is by thinking about the context within which it emerged. 2015 UCT, the name of the movement there was tied to one of the symptoms of the problem, Rhodes. Rhodes must fall. The demand to remove the statue of the colonizer, Cecil John Rhodes. But this was merely a symptom, a representation of a much bigger underlying malaise in higher education. Let me list some of them. The need to accelerate transformation, to deal with the whiteness of institutional cultures, the way academic cultures privilege white ways of knowing, symbolized in commemorating precisely people like Steyn, like Rhodes, the way we represent things, omit things, silence things. Omnipresent were questions around language policies, residence culture, sports codes, dress codes, codes of being, the frustration of being, the frustration that brings, the daily insults, disregard, lack of understanding, lack of empathy, the pain that comes with studying hungry, the pain with studying in a foreign environment, black pain, the pain of the woman who knocks a glass ceiling, the staring eye on the transgendered body, the memory of fear, a rape culture, not just at Rhodes University, everywhere, the blind eye. Hence the demand to decolonize the university, to decolonize curricula, to Africanize staff, campus cultures, to bring Ubuntu into our way of being, relating, and learning together at universities. We can understand some of the student movement with reference to the context of its emergence. We can understand it as a critical pedagogical process, a process of relearning, how to be together and what we want to learn together towards getting qualifications. We can understand it as a process of beauty. Because as traumatic as it was, there was an unbelievable artistic creativity in it as well. A beauty, a horror, where the hope, the pain, the hatred, the love, the frustration was expressed with performances, processions, poetry, with letters being written, with buildings being renamed. There, right in the middle of the slide, you see Marcus Garvey, Freedom Walk, painted over. Videos, articles, and even the cleansing power of fire. It can be understood as a very strange way of policy making. Can be understood as a violent process, an increasingly violent process. The fact that half of all students who enter higher education leave without ever getting a qualification, that is violence. That is a violent system that kills dreams, that kills hopes, that kills futures. The tendency to blame the students for being underachiever, underprepared, underperforming, rather than looking at perhaps the institutional cultures and institutional malfunctions. The way students are being alienated, are being mistreated actually, the pervasiveness of amateurish, if not plainly bad teaching. But then there is this violence as well, of course, and again, who was bearing the brunt of it? Because most of it was actually police brutality, wasn't it? Remember the 22nd of February 2016, Shimla Park, and the aftermath of it. Just spoke to a student who's bearing very much the brunt of that. The 21st November 2015, the Fees Must Fall protests at Parliament. The trauma of violence. But I think I said I want to talk about the good news. So that's not good news, eh? No, man. I want to talk to you about good news. So, how else can we understand the student movement that started in 2015? So, with other words, once fees have fallen for good, once our universities have become beacons of African excellence, of African innovation, of professionalism, of intellectualism, once we have truly South African universities that are planted in the African soil and bear fruit that is relevant and nourishes the communities in which those universities are planted and which they serve, what then will be the legacy of the new South African student movement? And being a political scientist, of course, I'm going to talk to you about politics. Political culture. What do we do in South Africa when we have a political grievance and nobody listens? Those in authority don't care. What do? We put a match to it, right? Fuwani, you name it. We put a match to it. That is the political culture that we have inherited from apartheid and the struggle against it, isn't it? When politicians don't listen, when government is not responsive enough to the problems in communities, to the failures of service delivery, to lack of implementation, our political culture is violent. Police brutality on the one side. Today, it's 4 years since Marikana. But on the other hand as well, we put a match to it. Why? So that they come and listen, so that the SABC shows up, so that ETV, ETC shows up, isn't it? Because otherwise, where do you get the voice? You don't get the voice. How do you get the voice out? You don't get it out. You have to put a match to it. But this is what's so interesting about the 2015 student movement, which was highly effective. Within 1 month, the Rhodes statue was removed, and within 2 weeks, Pretoria, Zuma himself announced that there will be no fee increases. How did this work? Or let me ask it differently. What is perhaps our future political culture? One that does not need what is essentially a self-defeating match. Students replace the match with a cell phone. No, man, not this one, man. This one. They replace it with a smartphone. A smartphone that can do what? That can do what? That can do this. 1.5 million tweets. Fees must fall. Look at this. Retweeted, blogged news straight from the social media into the public media, into the SABC News, ETV, Al Jazeera. It was in the New York Times, it was in the London Times, it was in the Herald, it was everywhere. And eventually it went onto the political agenda. Very quick, very effective. No matches involved, just social media. So if we're talking about ways of understanding the student movement of 2015, what I want to put to you is that whether it is Trans Collective or Reform Puke, whether it is Stain Must Fall or Rhodes Must Fall or Fees Must Fall, the truly innovative dimension of the new student movement, and possibly the most common feature that they all shared across the board, was the way student activists and sympathizers used social media and the internet. You know, this is not new. In fact, Manuel Castells, one of the greatest living sociologists and the most highly cited communication theorist of the internet, wrote a book called Networks of Outrage and Hope in 2015, where he thought about the Arab Spring. Do you remember that? Where he thought about the Occupy movements. And he said, there's something new happening, and that is that social movements, networked social movements, internet age social movements, they have the ability to occupy simultaneously two spaces, the cyberspace and the public space. And that gives them a power that is unprecedented. Hence, the fast response. Cyberspace, the social media, right? Public space, well, let's think quickly at the UFS. Which space during Fees Must Fall was occupied by students? It was that space at the interface between city life and campus life. The main gate, right? That is what I'm talking about. Social media have the wonderful ability to amplify grassroots voices right there where it happens. And with that, create the kind of conditions where more responsive governance, whether it's on campus, as in the case of the student movement, or off campus in the nationwide Fees Must Fall, will happen. So, to sum up, what may be the lasting legacy, as I said, when fees have fallen for good, when our universities are properly decolonized and transformed institutions that serve the communities they were meant to serve? The student movement was also an experimental process of grassroots democratization, the legacy of which will hopefully be more democracy. The question is that I want to leave you with: can networked student power be harnessed for radically democratic forms of participation and decision-making in universities? Why not? We do surveys all the time and so on. Why not taking the actual decisions like that? Redesigning curricula like that, reorganizing our university lives. And once universities have realized the power of social networks in governance. Maybe we will vote the next time around on our smartphones rather than queuing at the ballot box. Thank you so much.